The Andy Poland Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Poland Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Nationals owner Mark Lerner says his team is not for sale. Really? We'll delve into that a little bit this morning. Jim Palmer was on Undisputed several years ago and had really some interesting things to say about his life. I've really been enjoying this series. I've been pulling highlights for you for the last, couple of months or so. Charles Barkley with some Super Bowl cleanup, and wait till you hear what he has to say about Skip Bayless. We'll get to that in the 10 o'clock hour, and a whole lot more as we move forward on this Tuesday, which is, I guess, the beginning of the week for some. Some of us worked yesterday on the holiday, but I guess for many people it's the start of a short work week as we begin on a Tuesday. Really enjoyed talking yesterday about Lefty Driesell. We spent the whole show on Lefty, and if you did not get a chance to hear it and would like to hear it, you can get it, as always, at ESPN630DC.com. That's ESPN630DC.com. But some great memories of an iconic figure. And I was just, thinking about this yesterday, about how long I've been here at this station. It's been nearly 5 years, believe it or not, that we started this in July of 2019. And since that time, the number of people who I admired so much over the years, and some of them I got to know a little bit, people like Bobby Mitchell and Wes Unseld and John Thompson, and now Lefty Driesell. I'm sure I'm leaving out a few others, but these people have all passed away in the last 4 or 5 years. And the enormous gap that they leave, it's especially for somebody my age, it's remarkable. And there's, of course, new generations of people. But, when I talk about the Mount Rushmore of basketball in this area, specifically coaches, because if we get into players, then you're talking about Elgin Baylor and Dave Bing, and do you include Wes Unseld, all those things. But the four coaches, to me, pretty clear cut, with Lefty, John Thompson, and Morgan Wooten at DeMath, and of course Gary Williams. Gary's the only one who now survives. Morgan passed away over the course of the time that we've been here, and man, it's really something when you grow up in this area and you revere all those people, and to see them pass away, it's jarring. It really is. So move on, and we move on to things that are much more positive than talking about death and talking about the Nationals. It's funny that they announced in April of 2022 that they were, quote, in an exploratory process with no set timetable or expectation of a specific outcome. But Barry Svrluga of the Washington Post said, oh, no, that they're selling. They're absolutely selling. And I'm sure he got that from Mark Lerner or somebody, of that level, or somebody who knows the thinking of Mark Lerner at the time. Now, when they announced the sale, Ted Lerner, the old man who was responsible for buying the team after Major League Baseball moved it here in 2005, and then the next year the Lerners bought the team for $450 million. He had passed away since that announcement. And there was some question as to whether there was a mind change from the family, although day-to-day operations of the team had been turned from Ted over to Mark in 2018. So he'd been running the team on a regular basis. But the assumption was they were selling. And then you had the whole drama over Juan Soto, that he had been offered, what was it, $460 million or something like that, and he turned it down. And so now the question was, do you up it? Do you get it over $500 million? And get him signed, and is that more attractive for somebody who wants to buy the team? I mean, all the discussion then was, what's going to happen with Soto, and how does it impact what they do in selling the team? I don't think there was ever any discussion of, well, they may change their minds. But then time passed. We opened up spring training last year, 2023. There's no sale. So now we've opened up 2024. And it seems to be business as usual with Davey Martinez telling the media yesterday.
Oh, it's awesome to get all the boys back together and see them and start having those conversations again. It's a lot of fun. It doesn't get old for me. I love it. This was day one, so we got a long way to go, but I enjoyed every minute of it.
And seeing these fans out here here, and what's that like for you as well? Just all the support that you're getting before the season even starts.
Oh, this is awesome. I mean, I've been here now. This is my 7th year, so I got to know a lot of our fans, and it's good to see him this early.
7 years for Davey Martinez in a position that most managers are not in. He's won. He won early, won his second year on the job, won the World Series. Now they've had 4 losing seasons, though they did better than expected last year with 71 wins, and he's back on the job with not much more help. The top free agent that they signed, Joey Gallo, got $5 million, and he's a 197 career hitter. And I even read where some of that money is deferred. A total expenditure on free agents in the offseason, $9.2 million. That ranks 24th in Major League Baseball. And with the additions that they have to the payroll, it's $110 million, with Steven Strasburg chewing up a lot of that. And be interesting to see if he shows up at spring training, by the way. The team is he would like to retire. We know that. But he's not going to walk away from the money. And apparently the team is saying, well, if you want to retire, but we're not going to pay you. So there's this standoff going on. But anyway, he's chewing up a lot of that. So the payroll of $110 million is $50 million below league average. Now, when they were winning, to the credit of the Lerners, they were paying. They had one of the top payrolls in the league. It wasn't, what the Dodgers obviously is now, with Shohei Ohtani making $70 million, though a lot of that's deferred, of course, or the Yankees, Red Sox, the usual big spenders. But they did spend money, and it paid off in a World Series in 2019, which they get, something of a honeymoon for that. But the sale, as pointed out, or the sale that's not happening now, if you want to believe Mark Lerner, Andrew Golden, writing about this in the Post today, he says it's worth noting that a season ago, John Angelos, at the time the, quote, control person for the Baltimore Orioles, a term Major League Baseball uses to designate the lead decision maker for each team, said he was not planning to sell his franchise. But last month, the Angelos family agreed to a deal that would cede control of the Orioles to a group led by David Rubenstein. For now, Lerner has made the family's intentions clear, that he is keeping the team. He said, nothing has changed. We just decided that it's not time for the place for it. We're very happy owning the team and bringing us back a ring one day. Well, based on the free agent spending, that one day is not going to be this year, or maybe not next year, and the year after, and the year after that. But for now, and I think that's a key phrase here. Nothing has changed. We just decided it's not the time or the place for it. Doesn't mean, couldn't be 6 months down the road, that it is the time or the place for it. So I wouldn't necessarily say, oh, that's it, Lerner's for life. They're not selling the team. And there's, by the way, more voices in this besides Mark Lerner. He's got a large family with sons-in-law of Ted Lerner, and he's got several sisters. So there's a lot that has to be worked out within the family. But for a team that was sold at $450 million, and the price, which was reported to be $2 billion, that in April of last year, Ted Leonsis reportedly made that offer of $2 billion. They turned it down. The Orioles just sold for $1.7 billion. Now, there is also the Masson situation. And with Angelos getting out, there's some question as to what it now means for the Masson deal. As you may remember, when the Nationals moved here in 2005 to keep Peter Angelos from suing everybody, because he claimed he had territorial rights over D.C., but he really didn't. But they didn't want to go to court with him, so they said, okay, we're going to make you in charge of the Masson contract, the network that would televise the games for the Nats and the Orioles, and you'll just split the money. Well, they've been in court constantly since then, fighting for it. They recently got a judgment for money that was due them through 2017, but now they got the last 5 seasons to deal with as to what they're going to get. Now, maybe this is related to that, and there's an insurance from Rubenstein, who I'm sure knows Mark Lerner, and Mark knows Ted Leonsis. I think these guys travel in similar circles. There's maybe some assurance that they're going to get things worked out with Masson. They're not going to have to fight for the money anymore, and maybe that'll play a factor. The other question is, what's the future of Masson? Because what was created in 2005 is much different these days. And these regional sports networks, they're a disaster all over the country as people are cutting the cord. And that may not be a sustainable thing either. Is it possible, even if Ted Leonsis doesn't buy the Nationals, and I think with what he's got going on right now, with all the mishigas of perhaps moving his two teams to Northern Virginia, we all hope that doesn't happen. But if he's tied up in that, maybe he's not going to concern himself with buying a major league team, though he does want to have this big empire. But is it possible that there is something worked out where Masson folds up and they give Ted what he wants? And that's really would seem to be the prime motivation for him wanting to buy the Nationals, that he would have television product for his monumental sports network that he bought. You know, he bought in as a partner, and now he bought out the whole thing, and that's where he televises the Wizards and the Caps. But it's two channels in the summer. It would seem that they could easily do what Masson did with Orioles and Nats. There may be a few times where there's conflicts because of playoff games. Not many playoff games for the Wizards anytime soon, it looks like, or maybe the Caps, sneak in this year or the year after. But they could probably work that out, and that might be something that is making it so that Lerner says, okay, we're not going to have to deal with that garbage anymore, and we're not going to sell the team. Speaking of garbage, boy, sometimes they say in sports, it's the best moves are the moves that you don't make. And after the Nats won the World Series in 2019, I don't think there were too many dissenters who looked at the deal that Steven Strasburg got and said, I think that's not something they should do, because he just won the World Series MVP. It looked like the team might be able to contend or win for the next few years, that they would be in the mix. So, sure, you guys in his prime, he's 30 years old, 31, bring him back. Well, that's turned out to be a complete disaster, obviously. But there was also sentiment to re-sign Anthony Rendon, that you would have the corner infielder that you needed, the power hitter, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, boy. Good thing they didn't do that. Fortunately for the Nationals, Anthony Rendon went to the Angels. He got a 7-year deal worth $245 million, and he's been hurt. When he's played, he hasn't played well. And he made $38 million last year. He'll make $38 million this year, next year, and 2026. That's $114 million over the next 3 years. Who said this to reporters yesterday as spring training opened for the Angels in Arizona?
Is it still a top priority for you, though?
That's never been a top priority for me. This is a job. So I do this to make a living. My faith, my family come first before this job. So if those things come before it, I'm leaving.
Is it a priority?
Oh, it's a priority for sure. This is my job. I'm here, aren't I?
Do you want to be here?
I don't want to talk to you guys at 7 in the morning or whatever time it is. So
do you want to be here playing baseball?
I have answered your question. So why do you keep picking at it?
Oh, yeah, you technically answered it.
Thank you.
Yeah, technically you did, and really amazingly, you said, yeah, it's just a job. They gave him the money. Buyer beware, or contractor beware. This guy, when he was here, he did produce. There's no question about it. Never really seemed to enjoy what he was doing. He certainly hated interaction with the media, and I don't think he even showed up for the parade. I think he hightailed it out of town. He lives in Houston, I believe, in the offseason, went to the University of Houston. So I think he hightailed it out and didn't even show up for that, and everybody knew he wasn't coming back. So they're on the hook for a turd for the next 3 years, and that there really isn't anything they can do about it. Now, he hasn't played more than 58 games in any of his 4 years. I mean, less than half a season in each of the 4 seasons that he's been with the Angels. So you have that, and then you have this odd juxtaposition with his teammate Mike Trout, who signed the biggest contract in baseball history until it was passed by Shohei Ohtani. It was a 13-year deal worth $426 million in 2019. And the Angels have been a losing team. He's been in the playoffs once, and it would seem if the Angels can get something for him, it would be wise to trade him because they're not winning with him, paying him all that money. He's 32 years old. How many more prime years does he have? 3, 4, maybe 5. And he's probably the greatest player in baseball history who we've never seen, because especially in this area, games are on late at night, and they're not in the postseason. He's a 3-time MVP. He's an 11-time All-Star. He's been in the postseason once, 3-game series, and done. And he was asked, well, don't you think maybe you might want to trade, might want to play for a winning team? And he said, quote, "I think the easy way out is to ask for a trade. There might be a time, maybe, I really haven't thought about this. When I signed the contract, I'm loyal. I want to win a championship here. The overall picture of winning a championship or getting to the playoffs here is the bigger satisfaction than bailing out and taking the easy way out. I think that's my mindset. Maybe down the road, some things will change." Could they make him a deadline deal? Yeah, maybe. He's still got a lot. She's got a lot of time left on that contract. The 12-year deal, 2019, was you have 6-7 years left. But it's not happening there. It's just not happening. And, some would look at this maybe like the Bradley Beal situation, where Beal re-signed for the max for a team that didn't figure to go anywhere. And then finally, new management, new front office people come in, and they look at it and they say, no, we're going to get rid of this guy. And their leverage, the Wizards' leverage, was severely limited by this contract because it had a no-trade clause in it. I don't think Trout has a no-trade in his deal. He might. I don't know if he does or not. But, for all that money and for all that success, let's not discount that, 3-time MVP and 11-time All-Star, it's not resulting in anything. It's, some of maybe injuries to him as well. He's missed a lot of time during his run with the Angels. But, you kind of want a guy who's really unhappy with losing, and you have 2 guys, both of them who've had, success individually. Rendon here, not with the Angels. Trout with the Angels. Trout hasn't had any postseason success. Rendon's already got his World Series ring, and he's got his big fat contract where he says it's just a job, it's not a priority. Wouldn't want to be an Angels manager. Well, I would for what they pay, but you got to deal with that kind of headache. Coming up, we'll get to Jim Palmer, who did a terrific interview. These have been great. Really enjoyed listening to him and bringing you the highlights. Jim Palmer, who played his entire career for the Baltimore Orioles, signed with them out of high school, was pitching in the World Series when he was 19 years old, and made his last World Series appearance in 1984 as a reliever for the Orioles, 83, when they won the World Series, and then retired the following season. We'll get to Jim Palmer and what he had to say on Undisputed as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Breaking news. The Commanders have announced that they have completed their coaching staff with the hire of John Glenn as assistant special teams coach. Well, that should put them in a new orbit. Yes, John Glenn actually comes from Seattle, of course. Worked with Dan Quinn there, was their linebackers coach from 2018 to 2013. So everything is done with the coaching staff all put away, and good luck to John Glenn, which is kind of a cool name to have in Washington. As was he a congressman or a senator? He was one of the two, and of course best known for his participation in the NASA program, but this is not the same guy, obviously. So John Glenn is squared away. By the way, I meant to mention in talking about what Mark Lerner said to the Post yesterday, that the team is not for sale. Again, he and his family, when his dad was still alive in 2022, announced that they were exploring options and looking into selling the team. That was more than 6 months before we finally got word, okay, Dan Snyder's had enough, and he's working with Bank of America to find a buyer. Now, with the Nationals, it was assumed right away, like, whoa, that's it. They're being sold. The Lerners are getting out. What are they doing? They're going. They're leaving. And a lot of us with the Snyder situation said, yeah, I'll believe it when I see it. Well, here we are 2 years later. The Commanders have been sold. There's new ownership. Dan Snyder is long gone, good riddance, and all we do now is look back on how awful it used to be. And not that the Lerners have been necessarily awful, but since they won the World Series, haven't been spending much. Less than $10 million spent this year on free agents. So it's just interesting on the timing of both of those things. Jim Palmer, great pitcher with the Baltimore Orioles, Hall of Fame pitcher, best pitcher in the history of the organization, and also doubled as an underwear model for all those years. Still working for the team, still great as a broadcaster. Does I would say about half their games on television. And this was, again, about 6-7 years ago, a series of interviews done by Dan Patrick and Joe Buck. I believe this one is with Dan Patrick. And they go through the lives of these famous athletes, coaches, you name it. And so Palmer sat down for an interview and told things about his life, which you may or may not be aware of, but tells them about as well as anybody could. He's a terrific broadcaster. It was so good that he was doing national games in the postseason when he was still playing. And even one year did them with Earl Weaver on ABC, and he and Earl kind of had a love-hate relationship during his years from the Orioles when he came up first in 1965 and stayed 20 years. His last season was 1984. One of the things they didn't cover, though, in this, and I wish they would have, because I think it's an incredible story. Palmer retires 84, first ballot Hall of Famer, so he's in 1990. And then the following spring, 91, I believe, he's down in Florida just, putzing around, throwing some pitches. And a pitching coach from a junior college takes a look at his motion. Maybe he doesn't even know who he is and says, I'd like to make a couple of suggestions here. If you remember Jim Palmer pitching, he had one of the smoothest motions you'll ever see. And he goes, okay, let's try this. And he starts doing it. And, again, he's been out of the game now 5-6 years, and he believes now he can make a comeback and got to the point where he went to spring training with the Orioles, was pitching, and I don't know if he got into a spring training game or not, but was doing the simulated games and, working out on the side and all that. He was serious about making a comeback and then, threw in the towel. Well, as it turned out, it was more of a negotiation for television, like, you don't want to pay me? I'll just go back and play. And I don't know how serious it was, but he always keeps himself in great shape. And when you saw him back with that number 22 in that Orioles uniform, you believe. But let's go back to the beginning, how his life began. And it began with adoption. And as he said, it turned out to be a very fortunate thing for him.
Privileged. I mean, I was adopted at birth in New York. I think when you grow up, my dad was Jewish. He owned a couple of dress companies. My mom had come from Omaha, was Catholic, met my dad. They adopted my sister, Bonnie, about 18 months before I was adopted. So that would have been somewhere, I think, in 1943, 1945, in October, I think, I was born on the 15th of October. I was adopted. Lived on Park Avenue, 1095 Park Avenue. I'm not sure what it was like then, but we had a nice apartment. And I still remember, my earliest remembrance is waking up one Saturday morning and there's about 15 cars in the driveway. And my father had passed away, so.
And how old are you?
About 9.5.
Did you understand?
I don't think you can really fathom, Dan, at that particular age. But my mom remarried and I took Max Palmer's name, who was a character actor, salesman, worked at Santa Anita and Hollywood Park in the restaurants and all that. So we moved to Beverly Hills, and I went to 6th, 7th, and 8th grades in Beverly Hills.
When did you fall in love with baseball?
When my dad took me to Yankee Stadium in 1954 when I was 9 years old. Years ago, Billy Crystal did the movie City Slickers, and there's a scene where they're in horseback in New Mexico, and he's with his buddy from New York, and he says, "What's your greatest day ever?" And he said, "Oh, when I was 10 years old, 1955, my dad took me to Yankee Stadium, and it was before color television, and when I walked up that the runway and actually saw the field, the lights, and whatever, he goes, that was the greatest day ever." Well, it happened to me a year earlier. I grew up wanting to be Mickey Mantle. I used to take my glove, and I had a Mickey Mantle glove, and I used to take the baseball and put the belt around it and put it underneath your mattress.
See, Park Avenue, end up in Beverly Hills. It does sound like a movie. If I was going to have a storyline, I said, okay, Here's a baby who's adopted. Park Avenue. Do you play baseball, play catch with the butler? Is
Well,
that right?
George, yeah.
Yeah. So you're playing.
Well, I couldn't get a friend. I mean, George was there.
So you got the butler who's playing catch. Tragedy happens with your stepfather dying at the age of 9. You moved to California, then to Beverly Hills, then to Arizona. I mean, that's a whole lot to fathom for somebody who.
Well, it is,
young.
and it's funny when you're adopted. It's not really who your biological parents are. It's who your real parents are. So I was very fortunate. I mean, I had parents that loved me. They taught me the importance of education and being polite. I couldn't have been more fortunate because this was a man that took me, again, embraced my mom, embraced me and my sister, and helped raise me.
Why did you take his name at age 9?
Because my mom was going to go from being Polly Wiesen to Polly Palmer. And I was 12 years old, and they were having the Little League, banquet. And when I was getting the best hitter, best pitcher award, I said, no longer will I be Jimmy Wiesen, I'll be Jim Palmer.
And he's in the audience?
He's in the audience, and he's tearing up. But the greatest thing is, I would play catch with Max in the backyard. And he said, I finally knew you were going to be a professional baseball. He said, when I couldn't catch it, and I went through the fence. So that's kind of how I kind of knew that maybe I had a future in baseball.
Yeah, he was a great athlete, and the family ultimately wound up in Arizona. And he was such a good basketball player. At one time, the all-time leading high school basketball scorer in Arizona history, that John Wooden tried to recruit him, tried to bring him to UCLA. And if you look at the timing, he would have been there at the same time as Lou Alcindor. Those teams lost only 2 games. And, think about Jim Palmer in the backcourt and Lou Alcindor at center with all the other talent that they had. Might have been interesting. And I'm sure that UCLA would have been happy to have him on the baseball team as well. Probably would have been able to pull off both sports because at the time, the way the demands were for both of them was a little bit different. Now, sports are pretty much year round, but that's one of those, what if questions. But he wound up, going baseball, and this is the dilemma that he was faced with as he finished up his senior year of high school in Arizona.
Well, when I got out of high school, I was 10-0, and I could have gone to Arizona State or SC, go to UCLA. John Wooden had recruited me. So I had some options, and Bobby Winkles was the coach at Arizona State, and he said, listen, you're going to waste your time playing American Legion ball here because you're better than the guys you're facing. I got 4 guys from Arizona State going up to Winter, South Dakota in the Basin League, which was a college league. He said, you'll probably be the only high school player in the league. And they had all outfielders and whatever, and they said, because I was a pretty good hitter, they said, you're going to pitch. So it was a pretty tough league, and I did real well. Orioles sponsored the team, and Jim Russo was their scout, and I think one of the things I learned right then was every time he would fly in to see the ball club, he would come to Pierre, South Dakota, and it was about 60 miles from Winter. I'd be the guy to go pick him up. When he had to go back to the airport, I would be the guy that drove him. And I think he wanted to learn what Jim Palmer, not that he could throw real hard and, occasionally get his curveball over and maybe throw balls behind people because I had no idea where the ball was going, but he wanted to learn, I think, what Jim Palmer was as a person.
And off of that, the Orioles signed him. Now, this is 64, so it's the year before we have the draft. 65 was the first year that baseball had a draft, and I believe Reggie Jackson was taken second overall in that. Forget the Mets guy who went first overall, but Palmer was not drafted, so he chose to sign with the Orioles, and at the age of 19, he's up in the major leagues pitching against Sandy Koufax in the World Series. You talk about the irony of that. Jim Palmer adopted by a Jewish father. Sandy Koufax, of course, Jewish. And that's his last year, 1966. It's the Orioles and the Dodgers. Dodgers are heavily favored. And the Orioles swept him. And Palmer, who had come up briefly the year before and now is part of the rotation in 66, pitches the first shutout of his career in the World Series at Dodger Stadium against Sandy Koufax. I mean, just amazing. And, things are going really well. And then the next year hurts his arm, and he misses a good part of the season, has to go down to the minor leagues. And after this, incredible, start to his career, pitching a shutout in the World Series against Sandy Koufax and the Dodgers, he recognizing that at this point his career might have ended.
Well, I got my insurance license.
So you thought your career...
Well, you have a young wife. You have Jamie was, about a year and a half. You think your career's over. I went back to school. I went to Towson State. I'd done a year at Arizona, so I stayed, and I figured, well, I better get an education, got an insurance license, and I better figure out another way to try to make a living because I had a young family. So I rehabbed for about 6 or 7 weeks, and my arm got better, but it still hurt. So I pitched in the instructional league. My last game was 10 runs and 14 hits in 5 innings. And I was going to quit. And I had a guy named by the name of Marv Foxman. He worked for Lilly Pharmaceutical. And he said, have you ever tried this little blue and white anti-inflammatory, Endocin? And I said, no. So I take one for breakfast, one for lunch, one for dinner. The next day, go out to the ballpark. I'm throwing like 96, 7 again. So I went 6-0, no hitter. My arm got better. Davey Leonard came back, and next year we're both playing for the Orioles in 1969, and playing for Earl Weaver for the first time.
You start 10-2 in 1969.
Yeah, and Davey Leonard 6-0, so we're 16-2 as a room, and we're feeling really good about ourselves.
Then he has a magical game against the Oakland A's.
The high point came on August 13th at Memorial Stadium against the Oakland A's. Jim Palmer already owned 4 shutouts, but had just spent 41 days on the disabled list. Was he ready? Jim's performance left little doubt that he was. He pitched flawlessly as the Orioles grabbed an early lead. Then it was over. 23-year-old Jim Palmer became the only American League pitcher of the 1969 season to hurl a no-hitter.
I think you walked the bases loaded in the 9th?
Yeah, I did. Well, go back to A-ball. I walked 130, 129 innings.
Yeah.
But that's kind of circumstantial.
Yeah.
Because, well, I have an 8-0 lead. I got all the runs. And Reggie comes up, and I walk Reggie Jackson. And I go 0-2 on Dick Green, and I threw 3 pitches that far off the corner. And the umpire doesn't call him. So I walk him. And they send up a guy named Tommy Reynolds. And I go, I don't know this guy. I look on deck, Larry Haney is a catcher for the A's. Well, he used to play for the Orioles. I know Larry Haney. And so I kind of walked Tommy Reynolds to get to Larry Haney. And he hits a ground ball to shortstop, which you just saw. But he goes, you know what's so amazing? He says, you pitched around everybody to get to me. And my mom was rooting for you because she was a Jim Palmer fan. So here you get the final guy out, a chance to break up a no-hitter, and his mom, because he came from Virginia and she must have watched the Orioles a lot. She's rooting, that Larry makes an out, and thank God he did.
Now, that 69 season, that's the season they lost to the Mets. The Orioles won 110 games that year, heavily favored, big favorites against the Mets. And they wound up losing the World Series in 5 games. They go back in 1970. They beat the Reds for the championship, and now they're back in it for the 3rd straight year, and they're facing the Pittsburgh Pirates. And Palmer is facing somebody, no interleague play in those days, so the only other time he would have faced him, I guess, would have been in an all-star game. But Palmer is the ace of the staff, and they're playing the Pirates, and he cannot deal with Roberto Clemente. Here's the story of that.
I play with a lot of great players, but Roberto Clemente, people go, who would have been the toughest out? I mean, Carew was tough. Brett was tough. I faced Willie Mays, but only in the All-Star game. But I don't know. I mean, I still remember Clay Dalrymple he had come over from the National League as one of our backup catchers. So we're going over the scouting Roberto Clemente. Well, you can throw him a fastball here, but don't do it twice. Get him out with a curveball, but I don't know if you want to do that more than once. And I'm going, well, how are we going to get this guy out? Well, and we didn't. He got 13 hits, was the MVP, stealing bases, throwing guys out from right field. And it's funny, everybody talks about Jackie Robinson, but, who obviously, broke the color barrier. But if you read the book Clemente, you realize how Latin players, or people, in his case from Puerto Rico, how they had to go through a lot of the things that the African-American players did going to the minor leagues.
Because there wasn't a pitch you could probably throw Clemente, because he was a bad ball.
Everything.
Yeah, a bad ball hitter.
Well, he had a triple left field, home run to right field off me. He could hit the high fastball. He could hit the breaking ball. He was a marvelous player. And probably a lot of people didn't know that, even though he would end up with 3,000 hits because he played in Pittsburgh.
So you lose like Game 7,
Well, 2-1.
Yeah.
But there's no embarrassment. You win 101 games. You have 420-game winners. They played great. They had Clemente. I mean, he stepped up. That's what postseason's about. I mean, you think, the great NBA, whether it's Magic and Larry Bird or the Super Bowls or whatever, the players that step up, and no disgrace losing to the Pirates and, Steve Blass 2-1. It's not like we got beat 11-9. But Clemente, what a player.
Yeah. Sadly, he died just a couple of years later in a plane crash just after getting his 3,000th hit. Last thing from Jim Palmer, and he did pitch until 1984 and was a relief pitcher in the 1983 World Series, last time that the Orioles won at the end of his career. But 79, still in his prime. And he's got to get the Orioles back to the World Series, where they're going to play the Pirates again. And sadly, Clemente's gone, but they've got an opportunity to avenge, I guess, what had happened in 1971. But they had to get there in the ALCS, and this is the story of how Palmer helped them to get there.
I hurt my elbow, so I come back, and I pitch in a game in Cleveland. I feel great. My elbow's finally well. We clinched the division about a week later. So we have a meeting after the game, and Pearl Weaver says, "You're pitching the first game of the playoffs, or you don't, putting you back on the disabled list." And I go, "We got the guy who's going to win the Cy Young Award." I said, "I'll pitch any game except the first game, because then I'd have to come back with only 3 days rest on the fourth day. And I don't know if I could do that because I haven't done it all summer. You're pitching the first game." I didn't drink a lot of champagne, and Earl had a little bit of champagne. Sunday morning, he's still hungover. And he comes in, and he's got his shower shoes on, and I'm going into the training room, and I go, "Earl, can we now just, have a rational discussion on who's going to pitch the first game of the playoffs, because we're going to play the Angels?" He goes, "You quit again." And all the coaches are coming over, and I want to not hear this anymore. So I go into the training room, and he puts his foot in the door. And I'm looking down at this little foot with shower shoes on, and I got the door, and he's kind of got it in between. So, and I'm thinking headlines. You remember the old days they used to, when they have the papers? This is not going to be headlines in the sports section. This is going to be the front of the Baltimore Sun. Palmer breaks Weaver's foot in clubhouse altercation. So I open up the door because I wanted to close it and just break his foot, but I don't. And I go, what can I really do to irritate him? So I have to kind of stand. I go, do I need to stoop to your level so we can see eye to eye? So anyway, I pitched the first game of the playoffs. I mean, so either way, he got his way.
Guys get to the World Series. Pirates are there.
Again.
Yeah. What do you remember?
Well, we got to bring up Earl Weaver. If we bunt in Game 2 in the 7th inning, or maybe the 8th inning with John Lowenstein, we probably win the first 2 games in Baltimore. And I remember we're playing. First 5 games were the coldest games that we had a snow delay, snow out in one of the games. And if we bunt, we might have had a chance to win. We end up losing 3-2. We win the next 2 games in Pittsburgh, and then we stop scoring runs. And then once again, we lose in 7 games to the Pirates. But once again, a very, very well-played World Series.
Do you start to think this might be your last chance at winning another World Series?
No.
Not at that age?
I'm playing on the Orioles.
Yeah.
Well, what am I? At 79, I'm 33 or 4? Yeah. I'm young. My arm's old, but I'm young. I didn't think that.
And he did. He was still there when they won the World Series in 1983, though it was as a relief pitcher. But incredible career, both as a player and as a broadcaster, and now in his late 70s, still getting it done. And very, very interesting conversation that he had with Joe Buck about his life. Charles Barkley hates to lose it. at anything, including gambling, and he talked about what he bet on this. Well, he didn't tell you the exact amount, but told you about betting on the Super Bowl and what he said about Skip Bayless, which you'll get a kick out of. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
All right, we got Tony coming up at 11 o'clock today, and I'm sure he'll have all-star thoughts. He may even talk about Lefty Driesell. I spent all of yesterday's show on the life of Lefty, who passed away over the weekend at 92. Tony knew him, covered him for many years at the University of Maryland, but we'll see. That's coming up at 11 o'clock. Some Super Bowl cleanup to get to here. Some things that we didn't get to yesterday and didn't get to last week. Charles Barkley was on with Dan Patrick. I think this was Friday. And, Barkley, he's known for liking to bet. And he wouldn't say how much he bet, but he did, as he always does, bet on the Super Bowl. And that touched off a discussion about a variety of things, including a great nugget that he dropped on his arch enemy, Skip Bayless.
I bet on the 49ers. I got beat really bad. I had a beat down. You know what's crazy? Number one, congratulations to Travis and Andy and Pat Mahomes and all those guys. And man, you got to talk about Chris Jones. Chris Jones, a monster, man.
Yeah.
But you know what's so crazy, Dan? I bet against the Chiefs in all three games. Buffalo, I was surprised that they won at Buffalo. Then I was really surprised how they played, how bad Baltimore played. And the Super Bowl was a good game. And let me tell you something. All these idiots, fools, and jackasses out here, you know who I'm talking about on these other networks, Dan. Why do we have to blame somebody? Kyle Shanahan has done a hell of a job, and we get the luxury of seeing what happened after the fact. I thought Kyle Shanahan had a really good point because he said, if from a lot, he says, well, if we had to score at first and they had scored, then it would have been sudden death. And I was like, that's logical to me. But we got so many idiots, fools, and jackasses on television now. Everybody has to have a hot take and blame somebody. The 49ers had a very good year. And listen, Pat Mahomes just great, plain simple. And let's stop the Tom Brady stuff already. Let's stop the Andy Reid, Bill Belichick stuff already. Patrick is on a great ascension. He's doing great. He's not Tom Brady yet. And Andy Reid, is a great coach, and he's won 3 Super Bowls. He's still 3 behind Bill. And let me tell you how stupid some of these guys are on television. You know how much I hate Skip Bayless. I hate him with every fiber. Sometimes he make me want to gain weight back so I can hate him with even more weight. He goes on television and says, if it wasn't for Tom Brady, Bill wouldn't have all these championships. And I'm like, well, Bill's the greatest coach ever. And he says, well, he only won the Super Bowls because of Tom Brady. Well, Andy Reid's a great coach. Exactly how many championships he won without Patrick Mahomes? Count him, Dan. He was in Philadelphia all those years. He didn't win the Super Bowl.
Why do you keep watching these shows if you hate?
Oh, I don't watch these shows. Trust me, I don't watch these shows. People send me these hot takes, and I love going hard at people because to sit there and say about Bill only won championship because of Tom Brady, that's stupid and asinine. And like I say, I like Andy Reid's a great person. He's a great coach. But how many championships has he won without Pat Mahomes? That'd be absolutely 0. So stop trying to hate on Bill Belichick. Hey, give Andy his flowers. Give Patrick his flowers. The only problem I have with the Kansas City Chiefs, honestly, Dan, why in the hell is Travis Kelce always open?
Well, don't blame that on.
Hey, listen, Travis is a friend of mine. He's a great, great player. He's in the conversation with Kellen Winslow and Gronk as the greatest tight end ever. But when I'm watching football, because I watch every football game because I bet on every football game. All I'm saying to myself, yo, man, why is Travis Kelce always open? It drives me crazy, to be honest with you.
Going back to the coach and the star player, it's like Michael Jordan and Phil Jackson sharing that.
Yeah, but for some reason, people want to take shots at Bill, and it ain't right. When you get on television, our job is to be fair and objective. And we got some clowns on television now who like Belichick is overrated. Dude went to 9 Super Bowls. There's nobody who went to 9 Super Bowls who's overrated. And like I say, Tom Brady didn't play defense. He didn't play special teams. And you know what's really crazy? People are riding on Kyle Shanahan. At this stage of his career, his resume is probably better than Andy Reid's. Andy Reid only went to 1 Super Bowl in Philly. Kyle's been to 2 as a head coach. So at this stage of his career is probably better ahead of schedule of Andy Reid. And he's been getting to the Super Bowl with good quarterbacks, not great quarterbacks, good quarterbacks.
Oh, great is Charles Barkley. I love the line on Bayless. Barkley's lost a lot of weight now, and he said I may gain some of it back or all of it back so I could hate Skip even more. I wonder if that's totally sincere. I think it is. I think he's a guy who doesn't fool around. But you know, is this setting up for a Bayless Barkley standoff show? I don't know. Barkley's show, by the way, with Gayle King, which was really. I don't quite understand how they put them together. I know they're both very good on television. They're both very popular on television. Doesn't mean if you put them together you're going to get magic, and they haven't. That show, King Charles, which is play on the names Charles Barkley and Gayle King. It started off with bad ratings, and what I read, they've gotten worse. They've gotten worse. Not that each of them individually isn't incredibly talented as a television performer. He certainly is, and she's obviously very good. She's raised the ratings of the CBS morning show. It was like nowhere, and I don't know if I think at one point they're number one, or they're neck and neck with Good Morning America. Today's show's been kind of left in the dust, but anyway, the point is it doesn't necessarily work that you take somebody as great as Barkley is and somebody as great as Gayle King is, put them together, and then you got a great show. Just doesn't work that way. There's got to be a lot of chemistry issues, and they don't seem to have it. But Barkley alone, that's 4.5 minutes of great Barkley. You don't get much better than Barkley. On to more from the Super Bowl, and this is again a leftover and a thing that is maybe going to carry into the offseason. You got a real interesting situation brewing with analysts. Tony Romo, I think, has maybe 5 years, maybe more than that, 6 years left on his contract where he's making like $1 million a game, and he's getting heavily criticized for his performance. Greg Olson, on the other hand, has done a great job with Fox, and he's being elbowed out the door with Tom Brady, who's walking in with his $37.5 million contract. And the question is, what do you do? Now, I don't think that they're going to drop Romo and hire Olson, but that would make a lot of people happy. This is Jim Nantz, who was also on last week with Dan Patrick, and this was a Super Bowl follow-up, and it's about the way that the game was called at the end. They didn't get into the Romo criticism, but this is Nantz on how he called the final play of Super Bowl 58 with the touchdown pass from Patrick Mahomes.
As they're marching down the field, I knew I wanted to put something that had to do with Las Vegas. And then moreover, I'm so glad you brought this up because you sparked it. You had Brent on last week, Brent Musburger, right before I came on the show. And I had dinner the previous evening with Brent. And I idolized Brent. I have since I walked in the door in 1985. And Brent was the play-by-play voice of the Raiders up until a year ago. You know that. And he used to use jackpot in his touchdown calls for the Raiders. So during the broadcast on Sunday, they introduced the next Hall of Fame class to be inducted in Canton in August. And I mean, it just came to me as they were out there, and we put up a graphic with all the names, all the great deserving figures. And it just came to me on the spot, kind of like Jackpot did, that this was a window with a very big audience to get across the message that you started. And that was that Brent Musburger needs to receive the Pete Rozelle Award for media excellence and be in the broadcaster's wing of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And I took it upon that moment.
No, it was great.
To say it.
I appreciate it.
And I felt really good about it. And, you should feel good about it. And you started it. And then to be able to have the touchdown call in Las Vegas, where he lives, was some derivative of the way he used to call touchdowns for the Raiders. It felt right. It's not something I went into the game thinking that's what I was going to do. First off, you can't imagine you're going to have a walk-off touchdown for a game that's going to go 5 quarters. So, yeah, I'm really proud that I could channel Brent in that call.
Yeah, Brent, when he did the Raider games, he's not doing them anymore, but when he did them, he would say for touchdowns, jackpot. Nance wasn't quite as punctuating of the word, but he used it, and this is the final call of the Super Bowl from a week ago Sunday, which could have been a lot better if Tony Romo had let it breathe a little bit. So I'm going to play you what Nance did and what the Kansas City Chiefs did on their radio broadcast with Mitch Holthus and Dannon Hughes, and you get a better idea of what Tony Romo should have done at this moment, and after hearing jackpot, should have shut up.
First and goal. Mahomes flings it. It's there! Hardman! Jackpot! Kansas City!
And this was the Andy Reid special. This was the Andy Reid special we talked about. He was saving all day.
3 seconds he let it breathe. 3 seconds. That's an historic call. You got television pictures. Let it go. Save what you need to say about Andy Reid for 40 more seconds. Let the people take it all in, the sights and the sounds of what's happening on the field. Nope, got to jump right in. Andy Reid. Shut up. So here's a much better way to do it. This is all radio, no pictures for this. Mitch Holthus, who's been doing the games for many, many years for the Chiefs, and his color analyst, Dannon Hughes, knowing what to do when the winning touchdown was scored. Shut up.
A touchdown wins the game. 13 seconds to go in the overtime, 22-19 San Francisco. McKinnon is in at running back, first down and goal to go. Play action fake, right side throw, touchdown! Kansas City! McCole Hardman with the catch on the right side. A 3-yard touchdown pass in overtime. Kansas City wins the game, 25-22. And the Chiefs' kingdom has started its own history class, because for the first time in 6,944 days, there is a back-to-back Super Bowl champion, and it is the Kansas City Chiefs, champions of Super Bowl 58 on the heels of Super Bowl 57. The Chiefs do it in overtime.
McCole Hardman with the catch for the ages.
That, kids, is how to do it. You let the call breathe. And then when you realize that Mitch Holthus is done and people have been able to soak it in, then you make your comment. And that's going to be a problem with Romo going forward, because he truly has gone from the most impressive color analyst that many had seen when he was just out of football to now one who's kind of a mess and really isn't, whereas he used to be able to predict what the next play was, he's deferring to me. Well, what do you think, Jim? No, what do you think? You're the former player. You need to analyze this. Okay, you knew that this was a play that Andy Reid was saving, but okay, that can wait for another 30 seconds. So anyway, the main thing, I kind of drifted off course here, but good job from Jim Nance, very deferential guy, looking at what Brent Musburger did, the perfect call there in Las Vegas, jackpot, and the Kansas City Chiefs win. They win the game. So tomorrow night's college basketball game at Capital One Arena probably isn't on your radar, and nationally it probably won't raise too much attention. It's Georgetown, which is terrible this year. They won only one Big East game. That was against DePaul. DePaul's the worst team, and they've already fired the coach this year. It was going to be a tough year for Ed Cooley. And he has, he's ripped his team. He doesn't rip players by name, but rips mainly effort. It's not necessarily talent. He just, he doesn't say we're not good enough. He says we're not trying hard enough. He said the effort needs to be better. And, it's just been, really blunt about some games and says it's on him. It's his job to make the team better. And he kind of knew what he was in for. He took over a team that didn't win a Big East game at all last year. I think won only one or two the year before. It ended badly for Patrick Ewing, and this was going to be a rebuild. Rick Pitino, who brings his St. John's team into Georgetown tomorrow night or into D.C. for the game, his team started off pretty well. They started the season 12-4. They beat Utah, Xavier, Butler, Villanova, Providence, but they've been struggling lately, 2-8. And over the weekend, they played Seton Hall, and they had a 19-point first-half lead. They lost 68-62. And whereas you've heard Ed Cooley, and I really love listening to the Ed Cooley news conferences because he's so blunt when he talks, but Pitino took this to a different level when he not only ripped the effort of his team, but ripped the team, not anybody by name, but check out what, if you haven't heard it, this is what Pitino said after this 68-62 loss to Seton Hall.
We are so non-athletic that we can't guard anybody without fouling, and really it's not about losing. Because even in winning, when we watch the film, I see unathletic plays. I see people that don't handle the ball, that's just interested in taking quick shots. So it's been a disappointing year.
If you had to do it over again, would you have attacked your first offseason differently?
I had no choice. We just could take who we could get, who was available. We had no choice. I don't think we were going to win the first year anyway, because when you rush like that and you don't see the players and you just not a whole lot we can do. But it's I think I've enjoyed even the Celtics when we lost. I've enjoyed every minute being the Boston Celtic coach. Didn't like the fact that we lost in that following year, but this has been the most unenjoyable experience I've had since I've been coaching.
You have any second thoughts of taking this job?
No, not at all. It's not St. John's. It's my team. Look, I'm disappointed. I don't want to say the wrong things, but I'm really disappointed in my team.
I don't want to say the wrong things, but those are the right things to say? Apparently he thinks they are, because he did a follow-up interview yesterday with Newsday, and he said that this is a direct quote, truly wasn't ripping anybody. Didn't name a player, but he's telling you that his team isn't good enough, not quick enough, not capable. Truly wasn't ripping anybody. He said, I was pointing out exactly in a monotone voice why we lost. I'm not always calm, and certainly not when I rip someone. I wasn't ripping anybody. I sometimes want my players to hear my words and read my words. That was my intention. So I guess he's coaching his team through the media in this. And he went on to say that he didn't think he needed to clarify any of his comments from Sunday, saying, I'm fine with what I said. So this is a guy who is so well known for the Boston comments when he took over a Boston team that was going to have great lottery picks, and he thought that he was going to wind up with Tim Duncan. He wound up taking Chauncey Billups, and it didn't work out for him in Boston. And when it didn't work out, because he was both the coach and the general manager, they kind of shoved Red Auerbach out of the way at that point and famously said, hey, Larry Bird's not walking through that door. Kevin McHale's not walking through that door. Robert Parrish. So he's telling you, the players that I had in Boston weren't good, and he said he loved every minute of it. Now he calls this an unenjoyable experience. Hard to tell. I mean, he's in his 70s now. He was escorted out the door when this scandal broke at Louisville a couple of years ago, which wouldn't have been anything now. You had assistant coaches paying players, and a couple of them went to jail. He was just fired, and he did resurface at Iona, did well there, and now he's at St. John's with the transfer portal where he totally turned over the team. Now he's saying, well, I had to grab anybody I could get. Well, you're Rick Pitino. You should have been able to get some better players, but you didn't. Now you say your players stink. They're not capable of doing certain things. They're not athletic. We're non-athletic. Can't guard anybody without fouling. And then you say, oh, no, I truly wasn't ripping anybody. Okay. Never mind the game tomorrow night with Georgetown playing St. John's. I want to hear the news conferences of the two coaches. That's what I'm really interested in. Oh, yeah. Anyway, that's it for me today. Tony is coming up next, and I will see you back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.